I'm so honored to be able to present two of the crew, the non-hibernating crew of the Discovery One. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Keir DeLay and Gary Lockwood.
Well, welcome. Thank you for the applause.
I'm going to play this sitting down.
Okay. I was thinking about how to start off this little talk. Of course, we're going to have a Q&A afterwards, but I thought you might be interested to know when I first knew about, only go back into history for a little bit. When I was around 13, I discovered, maybe 12, I discovered science fiction. And my mother and father had a bookshop in Greenwich Village. And they realized that I suddenly was reading a lot, so science fiction. So they gave me a subscription to Galaxy. These were the magazines that were current at the time. Galaxy Science Fiction, Galaxy, Astounding Science Fiction, Fantasy Inside, about 3 magazines that I subscribed to. And then I started reading other books, and then my mother gave me the best science fiction of 1950, 1951. Each year there was, and they were short stories that had previously been published in science fiction magazines. I'm going to cut now to 1964. I was doing a film with Laurence Olivier and Carol Lindley called Bunny Lake is Missing. I came home one day and my wife, don't mind my wife. I just got to get you out of there, Oh God, they didn't call me Oedipus for nothing anyway. You know what that would make you in downtown LA. So I came back and my wife said, call your agent. He just called, so I called my agent. He said, are you sitting down? And I said, no. He said, you better sit down. I said, what? He said, you've just been offered the lead in Stanley Kubrick's next film. And I was a huge Stanley Kubrick fan. When I was in drama school, there was a nearby local theater, and they were showing a Kirk Douglas movie, war film. So I had the afternoon off, and I went down and was Paths of Glory. And my favorite Kubrick film is Paths of Glory. So I'm sitting there, and literally the first few frames started with them, that army going across all that no man's land, the way it opens. My jaw dropped to my knees. I couldn't believe. I said, who directed this? So I was suddenly, instantly, a Stanley Kubrick fan. Now we got back to 64. And then I got the script. I hadn't read the script. I was just knew about this offer to do this. And I started reading it, and I said, something about this is very familiar. And what it was going back to those collections in the early 50s, I had read a short story by Arthur C. Clarke called The Sentinel. How many of you know that short stories? Well, you may or may not know that that was the basis for the 2001: A Space Odyssey. It only dealt, the short story, for those of you who don't know it, only dealt with the finding of the monolith on the moon. And it kind of posed a question, an enticing question at the end of the film, of the short story, which was, this monolith was obviously a kind of cosmic alarm clock left by some passing superintelligence, maybe millions of years earlier. What happens when the alarm clock goes off? And that was kind of, I'm paraphrasing, so that was the question. So, the rest is history, as they say.
Well, you want to hear a little bit about my situation with Kubrick, and then a little tad on Star Trek, because it is sci-fi. And I did the pilot called Where No Man Has Gone Before. It stars out of Shatner and Nimoy. I never got a cut. My story is not unlike his in that I didn't grow up in New York City walking around with the privilege of seeing all the movies or in the village where everybody talks about movies in a coffee shop. I grew up on a ranch, and my father was Bunny loved carrots, and first guy to put carrots in a bag, and I worked every day as a kid. I hated it. And, don't grow up on a ranch. Anyway, I had been sort of a smart kid in school. I skipped grades. I did read some sci-fi. I hadn't read The Sentinel, but I had friends who had, and I'd kind of heard about it. But one day, I got to drive when I was 14 because I had an agricultural license, and I went down. I loved movies. I used to ride my horse to school in Newhall, California, which is Magic Mountain to you, I guess. If you like to go upside down, I don't know. Anyway, although I did in Centrifuge. So I drove my car to Pershing Square when one went to downtown L.A., parked my car, and I'd go to the movies all day long. That was my greatest fun. I mean, I liked that more than anything I did. I also was a bit of a reader as a kid. I liked to read. So I one day go to Beverly Hills to the Fine Arts, and there's a marquee, and it's a kind of a little art house, and it says The Killing. I don't have any idea. I just walk in and see this movie. Now, I have to tell you, I did win a national poster contest my senior year at Art High School in Newhall for my art. I designed homes and other things. Anyway, so I'll cut to the chase. I walk out and I watch this movie, The Killing, and it's totally different. And the artist in me, for whatever it was having a relationship with the screen. These shots are so interesting and terrific, and everything is so incredibly well done. And it's just a small film. You can tell it's not a big budget. I don't know that much about directors. I just know a few movie stars. And, I was in the rodeo as a kid, so I met Roy Rogers, and I was a trick rider with Monty Montana. I traveled all around the country and Canada doing rodeo shows. I was a performer. Anyway, it's the first time I ever stopped, and they had those kiosks where you bought the tickets, and then there was this sort of out of the rain, amphitheater to going inside where you got your popcorn. And I stopped, and there's this poster, The Killing. And I walk over and I go, Stanley Kubrick. Now, I never heard of him. Who had? And so I kind of just registered, God, that's a really interesting movie. But I didn't look at movies the way you say you did in your pals in New York. I was just a kid in the ranch. But I knew when something was good or different and everything. End of the story is I'm now playing football at UCLA. I had scholarships everywhere. I ended up because I like to surf. And so I went to UCLA and the Surf Rider Beach. And I lived in Malibu on the beach. And I was kind of a hustler as a kid. I sold football tickets and had Christmas tree lots, and I'm an entrepreneurial type of guy. So the end of the story is we have these double winds, and some of you are from California and some of you aren't. We have these double winds that come off the desert called the Santa Ana winds, and the Indians and the Chumash, and they get myths about them and all, but when they come and you're playing football and it's double practice, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, it is hell. Are you with me? You drive into UCLA, you get your training table, you get the free breakfast, and you kill yourself for an hour and a half in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon, and during your lunch hour, you wish you would die. And this goes on for 10 days. Well, this particular morning, I'm living in Malibu. I did get the paper, and I open it up, I kind of knock off the LA Times, and Kubrick's Paths of Glory. This guy, this Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory, and it's Paramount down on Hollywood across from the Crumbs Chinese. Holy God. Wow. Now, because I'm a line dog and a hustler all my life, big deal. I drive into the training table, I get my tray, and I turn, and there's the UCLA coaches, most of them Southerners. So there were nine of them sitting at a table, so there was 18 Nazi-like eyes staring at me. Thank you. And I walk up to the table, and I was who I was. I mean, I had been this way since I was a kid, and I have my tray, and I go, Coach, I can't come to practice today. Yeah. What the hell are you saying? You can't come back today. What you talking about? Blah, 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 blah. I said, Coach, it's summer. And I drove a Porsche. I was the only guy in school that had a Porsche. And he said, well, you and that funny little car you have, I mean, how in the hell do you put the gas in that thing anyway? You know, they're doing that one on me. And I said, well, I have to go to San Luis Obispo. I have to be in court. Now, anybody that thought it out would know that I was not going to get sent. Well, one time, I have to be in court by 12 o'clock or something. They bought it. What can they do? And they said, well, can you get back for this afternoon's practice? I said, I don't think so. It's like about 3 or 4 hours up and back. I mean, 5 or 6, 8, I don't know. I thought I'd get back for training table. Dinner. Well, you better come back to your nation. You know, they had to say something to me. So anyway, I drive downtown. And by the time I get there, walk around Hollywood a little bit in the old days when it was fun. God's Glory came out at 11:30 with the Paramount. I parked at the Chinese, and now I walked in there, I paid, and I saw Paths of Glory until I went back to dinner that night. So that's when my agent called me and said, Kubrick wants you for 2001. Well, I damn near cried. But I must tell you something. I said to my agent, who was a great agent, I mean, he had Jimmy Dean, Marlon Brando, all these people. And I said, God, Dick, let me ask you something. What's it going to cost me to do a movie like this?
I just want to tell 2 quick little stories. They're short. I think they might amuse you. The first one has to do with the voice of Hal. Kubrick wanted a voice for us to work with. And he was going to hire Marty Balsam. He's the guy who's in Psycho, the detective, the villain in the stair. To New York. So then he hired a British actor by the name of Nigel Davenport, fine actor, who was there with us and actually started the first week of shooting doing the voice of Hal. And Kubrick said, nah, too British. So then he said, you know what, I'll worry about it in post-production. So it turned to his assistant. Now, this film was filmed, for those of you who don't know, in north of London at the MGM British Studios. So the crew was entirely British. He turned to his first assistant director, Nigel Cracknell, right? Nigel. Anyway, he said, not
Derek Cracknell. Derek. What a name for an 80, Cracknell.
Anyway, he said, would you do the voice of the So this was the voice of Hal throughout the rest of the film for us. Dive. Yeah, that type of stress little guy. So, let me tell you, that took acting.
Hey, sorry, I have to say this. If you want to see Cure, it's something kind of interesting. I saw it. I've been there 2 times. At Lackner, which is the only Candy Art Museum, they have a Kubrick exhibit. So for some of you who haven't been here, I know you may be flying out, but if you can delay it a day, go over and see it. And the disconnection scene where Cure disconnects Hal as he begins to sing is pretty terrific. In fact, they feature.
I always think of that scene. What's the story about the Steinbeck story where you got the dummy who's the best friend of this? Mice and Men. If you remember, he's going to shoot, but covertly shoot his best friend because they know he's going to hang for killing this girl inadvertently, and he's just the sweetest dummy. And he's a retarded guy. And if you remember, he said, you remember we're going to buy the farm and the chickens? Yeah, I remember. And he shoots it. Well, anyway, that, for me, was analogously the scene taking Hal apart. Because he says, oh yeah, go ahead, Hal. Sing it. I remember. And then he sings crazy. The other thing I did, the other quick story is, there was a speech, a communication with Mission Control that was really technologically gobbledygook to me. It was like a foreign language. For me, anyway. And I was worried about it because I wanted to be free with it and do it right. And so I studied this particular speech for weeks before we were going to shoot it. And I can still, it's like then he decided, after all this work, it was decided that it was too redundant. It was very much like another scene where Mission Control speaks to us. But anyway, here's how it went. This is 1966. 65? No, 66. Mission Control, this is X-ray number 1. At 1920 onboard fault prediction center, 99000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 unit is possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-chip system simulator, also confirm your approval R plan, go EDA and replace Alpha Echo 35 unit, possible failure. Mission Control, this is X-ray Delta 1, transmission concluded.
It's not bad for a 90-year-old guy. Or maybe a couple hundred. But
Parenthetically, the only other time this ever happened to me was even earlier. I'll make this quick. In 1961, I did a remake for television with Maureen O'Hara of a famous movie called Mrs. Miniver, which was with Vera Garson and Walter Pidgeon. And it was about the home front during the Second World War in Britain. And there's this German pilot who's shot down and terrorizes Mrs. Miller, and I auditioned for it. And I put you on the next, and I could fight people. I was convincing, they believed me. And I said, I can do it, yeah, no problem. So I auditioned, I got the role, but they asked me, can you speak German? I said, I lied, I wanted to get the role. I said, yeah, I got you. So I got the role, and then just before rehearsal began, my agent called me and said, they're very pleased to hear that you're going to be doing the role, but they decided to do it in German. They're going to do it in German. So I got a buddy of mine from the drama school who spoke. Did you speak German here? No? All right. My mother was over that. So he coached me phonetically, and I learned it phonetically just like the speech from Space Odyssey. Here's how it went. Ich bin kaputt, aber andere Deutsche kommen. Tausende andere kommen und bombardieren. Ja, bombardieren. Wir haben viele Geschichten bombardiert. Nachricht. Wurde dann kaputt? Wurde dann in 50 Minuten kaputt? Ja, in 50 Minuten kaputt. Und wir werden sie kaputt machen. Wir machen England tot. Ganz nicht mehr England. Männer, Weiber, Kinder. Alles kaputt. Alles tot. And that was 1961.
and then Vera Garson said, shut up, eat your breakfast. I will just tell you very quickly about, I'll do one brief moment here about Star Trek pilot, because I know probably some of them. I had the Kubrick movie and Roddenberry, Gene Roddenberry. I had worked for him an entire year. And I had a good relationship with him. He was a very bright man, but he was a big hustler, and I'm a bit of a hustler, and so we used to try to con one another. So I got the Kubrick movie, and so I'm not doing anything. I'm going to go do a play in Chicago, and then I'm on my way to London. And Roddenberry asked me if I would do the pilot for Star Trek. So I said, well, I'm doing a play in Chicago. He said, no. He said, he really wanted me to do this play. And he said, this show. And he said, no, I made a pilot for Star Trek. It was called a Menagerie. It didn't sell. They gave me enough money to make another pilot. And they asked me if I would get you, because I was a little famous then. And if you sell a pilot, you got to sell it to the Buick people and the aspirin people and the beer people, or other ways. So they ordered 13 shows or whatever. So I agreed, and he sent the script out to me, and I read it, and I said, hey, it's kind of interesting, that. And he said, did you like it? And I said, yeah. I said, it's a little different, but, fine, I'll figure out how to do it. And he said, well, you're going to play God. And I said, he knows me. So Roddenberry, well, that's what Roddenberry said. He said, you're going to play God, and everybody who knows you knows that that's who you think you are. It's not very nice, but it was part of our banter. So I I do this show, and the great William Shatner shows up, and Leonard Nimoy, who I worked with before. By the way, Leonard got that show because of me, because Roddenberry explained Spock to me one day. And by the way, Roddenberry and I hate to tell you, we're drunk. The season was over. We were at his house, and we'd been drinking, and we're standing out on the balcony of this beautiful home in Humber Hills. And he's telling me about his new pilot, Star Trek. And he explains the character Spock, and he said, who do you think I ought to get him? And I remember these words. We're both drunk. And he had a cigarette. He was holding it like this, and he never would knock the ashes off. So the ashes went out and formed like a small arch, like over St. Louis, And he's got his cigar, and he would go. He was just a game he played with himself. And who do you think I should have to play this character? I said, well, those kind of things require a talented guy. It looks like it. I mean, I don't really know. I have not read it, but I mean, he did cast. But I said, well, he said, who do you think I should get? And I said, well, it was this actor from New York. He was a little bit of a strange-looking guy, but he was really good. I did a couple jobs with him. His name is, he's a Jewish guy. He's got one of these names like mother's name, like Leonard, somebody was, Nimoy. I said, yeah, that's him. But what's funny is we're drunk. I thought you might give a kick out. So Nimoy becomes, Spock. And I go with it Europe, do 2001, and I come back. And I go to the Director's Guild one day, and so I see Nimoy. But now Nimoy is famous. And here's the end of it. I say, hey, Leonard, congratulations on your success. And he says, oh, yes. Like, who am I? And how dare you talk to me? I'll never forget that. I just look at him and go, interesting. So now that I'm out doing autograph shows, and when I've gone to a Star Trek thing or something like that, they go, Leonard's in the green room. Would you like to go say hello? And I will not tell you what I tell them. They'll tell you. Anyway,
how much time do we have? You want the Q&A, right?
Yeah, maybe just a couple of minutes and we can start Q&A.
A couple of minutes. Okay, well, as you all know, or maybe you don't, that there's no computer-generated special effects. Everything that you see was photographed in reality, one way or the other. And you might be interested to know how certain things were done, like the fact when the BBC interview that we do together while we're eating breakfast or whatever, if you remember, Gary Lockwood is upside down because it's a big wheel, and I'm down here at the bottom, and all within one shot, without any cuts. I walk upside down because it's the artificial gravity by the spinning wheel. Well, how they did that was he had a hidden harness under his wardrobe, and they had to paste the food to the fork so that it wouldn't drop down because he was upside down, way the hell, 3 stories up. And all they did, I just stood in place, and they revolved him down to me. That's how they have to.
Made a star out of him, and I'm the guy that had all the blood in my head. I have to say this. When the first time, you don't recall, we did that several times. Yeah. The first time I did it, Stanley said, he was a real cool guy. He goes, all right, Lockwood, on action, just start eating. I'm upside down trying to be cool, right? And I take a fork, and it's all purple, green, and red or something. And I stick a fork in the green, and as I bring it to my mouth, it goes, shh. It's like 65 feet. Shh. You know what a Rorschach test is, right?
And the other one I just was thank God I'm going to do it once, was the scene where Al won't let me in, so I have to go in the emergency hatch. And if you remember, the explosive bolts blow the door in, and I float around and bang around in there in weightless condition until I'm finally able to, holding my breath, pull an emergency lever which closes the door and the oxygen comes in. How they did that was, you imagine, again, 3 stories high, and it looked, from your point of view, like if this was lateral, but it was all shut upside down. I was off to the side, and all they needed in that room or that shaft was the front of the pod. And I was on platform beside the front of the pod, and I had one piano wire attached to my groin, more or less. And what I was supposed to do was to dive headfirst toward the lens, which was 3 stories below, right toward the lens. They couldn't use a double because, if you remember, I'd forgotten my helmet in the rush to save my friend. So, attached to the wire, what they had braided a big rope, which at the end of that rope was a circus roustabout. They had measured how long the rope should be at various points so that he could stop me before I killed myself. And he had big, huge gloves. So what they did is they had these huge knots, and the moment the knot would slide up into his gloves, he would cinch it, and I wouldn't. So what happened was, we were both there. I dived headfirst toward the camera, and then when the knot reached his gloves, he jumped off the platform, and I went in block and tackle. I went squirreling back up to the ceiling again. Then as soon as his feet hit the ground, he let go again, waiting for the next knot, and I plunged toward the camera again. But of course, this is it's filmed that way, but from your point, it looks like I'm weightless, bouncing around in there. That's how that was done.
By the way, I just thought something, as you were telling that story, to just sort of add to this for fun. The piano wire was tuned to a D minor. And that meant death, right?
Should we do that with this really loud so we have to run around with a mic?
Yeah, when you look back on it, on 2001, is there anything that you wish you would have done differently or was shocked you did differently that didn't get you?
No way.
I can't think of anything. As I told you, that speech was never used, but I didn't miss it. No, I think...
No, it's one of those rare times that every time I've seen it a few times and I just go, wow. You know, we did it the right way.
We're often asked, people come by and say, what was it like to work with Stanley Kubrick? And my one sentence answer is, it doesn't get better. He was an extraordinary man. You really realize that you're in the presence of genius. It's that simple.
As an attendant of that, we have some very special things that we've never had in any shows, photographs of Kubrick with us.
Yeah, this is the first time we've had those pictures.
So if you're fans, any of you, you can stop by our table and we'll gladly take your money, but we'll give you. I'm going to my house in Canada on Monday and I need extra gas. Back there.
When you were doing the film, you knew it was going to be a good film. Did you know it was going to be an historic event in the history of science fiction?
I'm going to go first because it'll make sense when you hear my answer, and that is, I knew I was in a very important film that year because of Stanley Kubrick. He was already, he'd done Dr. Strangelove and Lisa and Spark. He was an important director, so he was going to get a lot of attention for any film that he did. So I knew I'd get that attention, but I think he had more insight. Gary?
Well, I accept the encomium gratefully. Oh, nobody knows what encomium is. Somebody does. Who knows what encomium is? Oh my God, that feels good. No, praise. Anyway, if I say, you were really good in the disconnection scene, I'm dropping an encomium on my pal here. Anyway, listen, what the fuck? Oh, yeah. I got it. When I read the script and I knew Kubrick, and I'm a little bit of a kind of a slightly high-tech kind of guy, and I Strangelove was brilliant, and when I was a young kid at the rodeo, Slim Pickens, who played the captain in Dr. Strangelove, hey, we're going to hell. Head-to-toe nuclear warfare with a roast beef. Remember him? Put on his cowboy hat, writes the bomb down. Well, anyway, when I was a kid, he was a rodeo cowboy. And I was a trick rider, which makes you like a mini star in the rodeo. I wasn't a contestant. The only time I watched a rodeo was when the bull riding came. And then Slim would come out, and he would, if the bull threw a guy and was chasing him, Slim would go get him with a cape. Anyway, I ran into Slim one day, and I said, hey, Slim, I got the new Stanley Kubrick movie, and he says, God, dang, you and Stanley will love each other. Anyway, listen, he's right. The end of the story is I knew. I know I'm a cocky guy, but I mean, so it's always been that way. But I knew we had done it, and I knew we were going to do it. I knew it. I mean, I'm serious. And I was sort of taken apart for it by the press. And then the years go by, and it annoyed the hell out of me because, we got bad reviews for the picture.
Very mixed. There was a lot of medicine.
70-30 bad. 70-30 bad. I don't know what they were doing, and then, blah, 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 and they were the paradigm of robots, and, what was this all about? And then, well, the audiences around the United States of America began to build. And I remember I had made a movie in New York called Splinter in the Grass with Warren Beatty. And we did 3 premieres in 3 days. We did Washington, D.C., we did New York City, we did California. And we had kind of, at the Washington, D.C., there was a huge party afterward, but, Washington, D.C. is political, so they're all shoe salesmen. And they came to the premiere looking to see if Cary Grant was there, and Cary wasn't there. And these programs that are brilliant now, that are worth hundreds of dollars when we both signed them, maybe a couple of you have one, they were just, I could have taken a leaf bag sack and filled those up, and I would have put my kid through college with them today. The reality is those programs were just falling to the floor. Remember in Washington? We got back to California, which is a movie town, and so now the premiere was filled with a lot of movie stars and pals of mine and all that. And Warren Beatty came up to me, and Keira and I are out there with those other wives. Those first wives. We've had a lot of wives. I'm teasing. He has a lovely wife now, and so do I. But the point is, we're standing in the lobby, and we're all chatting, and in those days I think I smoked, and I'm having a cigarette. And I remember Warren Beatty came up, and he kind of stuck his head. And, he was a big star, Splendor of the Grass, and he was doing big movies one after another. He also had told me one day that he wanted to do this picture. He wanted to play your part. And he stuck his head in, and he looked right into my eyes. And Warren's a strange dude, but he's a very bright man. He goes, "You're really lucky."
Just wondering, as actors, you said that you had somebody else doing the voice of Hal during the rehearsal. So did your perspective of the film change once you saw with the real voice? Did you get a different experience out of it?
For me, I think it enhanced it a bit to hear that. What a unique sound.
Douglas Rains.
Douglas Rains. It's just that you might be Douglas Rains is a Canadian actor, very well known in Canada. He's known mainly for doing leads in Shakespearean plays on the equivalent of Broadway up there in Toronto and all the major cities. He's very well known. We're getting along in age now, but he will not do any interviews or sign anything to do with 2001 because his reaction is, I have had a 55-year career in major Shakespearean roles, and all anybody wants to do is interview me about a job, which was a 2-day job.
Okay, I have a retort for Mr. Rains, which is well, you knew I was going to say something, right? I was an art and English major at UCLA as a football player. The only guy in the football team with crayons in his locker. I had a very successful family. My father was funny loved carrots. He put carrots in the bag, first guy to do that. And I was estranged from my family for years. I lived in some rotten little trailer park in high school, and my father didn't like me. And later he kind of rallied, and then I was friendly with him before he died. But the point I want to make is there comes a time in one's life when you just absolutely have to go, and I have to say this to Douglas Rains, I spent 1 year in business school at UCLA, and it was the worst year of my life. Now, I'm a hustler, and I'm entrepreneurial, and I know all that, and if people know that, no, I am. But business in college was the boringest damn thing there ever was. And being a bad guy, you had problem parking at UCLA, so I went up to parking lot 2 near Westward, near Sunset and Hillgard. It's for those of you who know UCLA. And I photographed a guy's parking permit with a Leica camera. Okay, I'm a high-tech kind of guy, and I borrowed a Leica, and I photographed it. I went to Bel Air Camp in Westwood, had it developed, cut it all out with an X-Acto knife, stuck it on my car. And I could drive my little Porsche right in, because I was going to be in the business school for a year, you got me? And now I had to walk like 75 yards. Parking UCLA is a major problem for students. And so I'm sitting in my little Porsche going, oh God, I'm going to Econ 1A, all right. And in comes one of those Studebakers, like in 1947. You couldn't tell if it was going backward or forward. And I'm thinking, you know, I forgot the great writer who wrote The Man with Great Flannel Suit or something like that. And I'm sitting in my Porsche, and in comes this really ugly little brown Studebaker, brown car, you know. And it probably had like brown upholstery. And he, brown cow, and he comes in and he parks right next to me. And I look over at him, and he gets out this rumpled suit. He's a professor. And I go, God, look at this guy. You know, Jesus, what a piece of work. So he walks, and he's got this old leather briefcase, and he's unhappy walk. His whole ambient body manner is terrible. And I follow him in. And I got to go to room 109 or something, and I'll be damned, he turned in there. And now I'm in there, and he comes in, and he puts his bag down, and I sit there, and, you know, I'm like a guy with a little ADT, a little deficit disorder. If a guy's boring, and I go, and he turns around, and he writes, Adam Smith, father of economics. He doesn't say, welcome to the class, and this is my book. And he turns around and starts his first lecture. See, that's terrible when you're a college professor. You're supposed to go, all right, everybody, buy my book, see you around, have a good day, go drink coffee, hustle girls and boys. So I want to say to Douglas Raines, Douglas, I know you're very talented, and you're great in Shakespeare, and you're a Canadian star, and everybody has great reverence for you, but get with the economics. Unless you're rich, you're losing a fortune, because we've been doing 2001 all over the world.
I just want to say, there has never been a film like 2001 before or since. And it wasn't just a breakthrough in terms of visual effects, which everyone talks about, but also in terms of story, of narrative, of themes. And thank you so much for coming here and sharing your experience. But I wanted to ask, because it was so different, radically different, long stretches with no dialogue, what was your own personal reaction to the film when you first saw it in its completed form?
Well, that's asking me to go back. You know, it started not just with 2000, but any time, at least my experience may be different for Gary, but it's a little hard to detach when you first see yourself in any film. It's a little hard to detach from the way, I mean, you remember the camera setups. You're seeing it in your memory. It's all still in pieces. And suddenly you're seeing it, oh yeah, you're kind of, it's hard to be objective for a while. Now when I see it, it's like, it really isn't me up there anymore. So many years have gone by. So I more and more that I've seen it, the more and more I appreciate it. But my favorite section of the film was when I wasn't in. Because I could look at. I love the Dawn of Man sequence. That happens to be my personal favorite of the whole film, and my personal favorite moment. Two moments are my favorite moments in the whole film. One is when the penny drops for the lead ape man. It's like he's fiddling around with Bones and and suddenly in mid-motion. You know how a dog goes when it sees something curious and will go? That's what he did. It was brilliant. This other moment is the greatest jump cut in film history. And that is when he tosses the bone up and in slow motion and morphs into a space vehicle. And my wife and I have only recently discovered within the last few years, that was just a space vehicle, which is what my reaction was. It was it was a nuclear weapon. So you have the first weapon, a bone, morphing into a nuclear weapon. Because if you remember, I don't know how many of you actually read the book, but Arthur C. Clarke, as I remember, kind of saw that the world at that point would be the two major powers, Soviet Union and United States, were at odds kind of evenly, and both powers had nuclear weapons in constant orbit around the world, and at any moment, at a push button, they could have rained death upon each other. So,
Which meant they both had Germans. You laugh at me, you read about it. Those of you who know, I'll tell you what I mean. When the war was over, World War II, some Germans went to Russia, and some, it's famous, said, well, the English will be broke, so that leaves the Americans. That's a true story.
we said you go there. Go ahead. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's two questions so that you can be as brief as you want. Number one, I'm very curious how much input Stanley wanted in your performance. In other words, did he do a lot of takes, and how much did he control your performances? And my second question was, the ending is very mysterious, and I'm curious how he explained it to you, if you understood its meaning while you were filming it, and if you understand its meaning now.
Well, I have my own interpretation. I don't remember this. It's hard after all these years whether I kind of understood it or whether Stanley explained it. No, he was real cool. Something about directors you should know is that the greatest directors cast the best. If you cast well, you don't have to do a lot of directing. And he kind of had confidence in what we did. He was so cool. I mean, he gave us direction, go here, go there. But the only thing he gave me, he wanted, I don't know if you remember the film, he said, when I was like my close-up, he wanted me to kind of look this way, if you look at the film, there's a lot of me kind of like this. But basically, there wasn't a lot of direction. I'm just going to try to make this quick, the ending. And this is my interpretation of that Louis XVI rule, is, you know how when we capture an animal, put him in a zoo, we put a polar bear, we make a cave and a little pool to make him think he's home? Or a squirrel in a cave with brush? Well, the passing intelligence, being millions of years in advance to us, don't need to do that. They can go into your brain and play it like a tape recorder. And they probably played my brain, this is my interpretation, and they saw something, habitat. Well, maybe I walked through the Louvre Museum one day, and that's what they saw. So they created that, probably not in reality, probably all within my brain to cover the whole aging process. I don't know if you're following me, but that's my own personal interpretation of that.
I'd like to add, as regards to Dan's response to your question, the mere fact that you asked the question is all you need to know. You see, that's the beauty of the movie. And it is a bit like a Rorschach test, because we had a nun come up to us one day and said, that was the most godlike film I've ever seen. We weren't exactly churchgoers.
Interesting. You may remember, those of you who are older, when it was within not very long, a few months, the MGM people began to realize a lot of people were going to this film after having smoked funny cigarettes. So they changed the slogan, if you remember, and then the newest poster said, the ultimate trip. And just quickly to answer your question about takes, I think as he went on, he was well known, Kubrick, for doing, 10, 15 takes. I don't remember his having more takes than the average that I'd experienced in other films particularly. But what did take time?
In the Leopard, he would get 35.
Oh, that one. But in general, right? In general,
Maybe trying to wear us out.
5, 6, but and Hal's being others. But what did take time was the time in between camera sometimes, you know, 5 minutes of this film would take all day. I mean, it took so long, particularly that room, for example, that you asked me about. It took so long to light it. He would have a board with maybe 50 or 60 Polaroids, and he took each Polaroid individually before we ever got on the set. So sometimes, in a few cases, I seem to remember in that sequence, maybe that we did 2 camera angles the whole day, literally.
Gentlemen, we have time for one more question. We have a 12 o'clock panel coming in.
Was Arthur C. Clarke, I'm just saying, he was early on, you know.
Occasionally.
Yeah, he was a nice man, but he didn't, you know, he left it up to Kubrick. He didn't really.
If you want to hear something about Arthur, I went to the University of Chicago where Kira was born. Where Hal was born, in Champaign, Urbana. And we tried to find him. I don't know where the hell he was. And so they wanted him to come. He didn't come. And I went to Champaign, Urbana, spent a week there. It was a beautiful campus. And they paid a homage, and they opened up their new theater. And they played Christine Friend of 2001. I shouldn't say this, but Roger Ebert was there. I know he just passed away, but he drove me crazy.
Arthur C. Clarke.
So Roger C. Clarke, just like wait till the time bell. Listen, he's a postman in New York, but he's not working. You don't get me on that. Anyway, the end of the story is, what the hell was it? Arthur C. Clarke and myself held a conversation. He lived in the Maldives, near Sri Lanka. And basically, I don't know if it's true, but apparently this was the first transmission, audio-visual, ever on the internet. That's what I was told. I'm sure it was done militarily, you know, with CIA. But here's what it was. Arthur C. Clarke and I talked in Chicago that night on the internet. And Arthur C. Clarke, his voice was regular, but the visual was as if you shot it at 600 frames per second. Are you with me? Beyond slow-mo. And he would go, the voice would say, well, Gary, nice to chat with you. I haven't seen you in quite some time. Rather lovely, you're in Champaign, Urbana, you know, where Hal was born, blah, blah, blah. And his voice, his face would be going,
Hey guys, thank you so much for your reception. And if anybody wants to see our newest pictures, some of them we've never had at shows before, it's right out, our table's right outside.
tell them about the book, quickly.
Oh, there's a really,